The video I'm replying to is over an hour long, and many of his points are theological in nature and not relevant to the discussion I'm interested in having. So I won't be reviewing every second of the video, just several points within the video itself. As a note, my lack of replying to any point in his video is not an endorsement of his statements.
Last week, I was down in Florida. I spoke at a conference at a local church with a very fine African-American pastor. And they asked me to speak on the matter of transgenderism, which I was happy to do, and I did.
Transgenderism is an outdated term no longer in use by the medical community. Its etymological foundations are built upon the diagnosis of transgender people having a mental disorder, which is contrary to the contemporary understanding of trans identities. Make no mistake, this pastor is using the term not out of ignorance, but out of malice to paint transgender people in an unflattering light.
Certainly, the darkness of these things has only accelerated since I last spoke on them. It's a critical issue in society.
Transgender people make up an estimated 1% of the United States population at the high end and 0.3% at the low end of the estimates. The critical issue here is that the National Transgender Discrimination Survey reports that of 6,450 transgender respondents, 41% said they had attempted suicide in the past. Not that 1% of the population is potentially transgender.
First of all, if every June in every single year we are going to be subject to the relentless propaganda of Pride Month.
Just a side note here, but pride is not propaganda.
But beloved, the church, speaking very broadly, the Church of Jesus Christ will lose the gospel if it fails to stand firm on this issue. Because transgenderism, more than a matter of personal identity, transgenderism is an assault on the principle of truth itself. The whole premise that underlies transgenderism is a direct assault on the principle of absolute objective truth.
The idea that transgender people somehow challenge or are a direct assault on some kind of principle of absolute objective truth just seems silly to me for a number of reasons. The notion that there is some sort of divinely inspired objective truth just seems weird. While this pastor's particular branch of hateful rhetoric wants to claim that transgender people are a direct assault on this objective truth, other branches of Christianity are much more open and accepting of transgender people, and they've renegotiated the exact same text of the Bible that he has. To me, having two branches of the same religion renegotiate the same text and come to two wildly different conclusions would indicate to me that the concept of objective truth is nonsense. Additionally, the concept of gender roles has itself changed over time, especially in the modern era where we've used the scientific method to prove that diversity in the workplace leads to a more profitable business and a more efficient workspace. There are also studies that show that it is important for male mental health and the health of their children for men to be around to help raise their children. That means we've seen women move away from being homemakers to being successful members of the workforce, while men have simultaneously increased their roles at home, helping to raise their children and take on a more traditionally feminine role. So my question is, what exactly are transgender people a direct assault on? If both men and women are fully capable of embracing the traditional roles of the opposite gender, and we have clear empirical evidence that having a fluidity of social responsibilities between the genders is a good thing, why can't they embrace the social dress and behaviors typically associated with another gender?
Understand that part of the goal, the obvious goal of the propaganda machine of Pride Month and everything in between, is to create an environment where all of these things are accepted as right and normal and true.
Well, that's almost completely correct. From an academic perspective, we already know these things. The idea is very simple. If you legitimize, not normalize, legitimize minority behaviors that do not have a direct, measurable negative impact on society, then you can significantly reduce the stressors on the lives of those minorities. This has a direct impact on both the individuals and society as a whole. whole. Minorities live longer lives, report living happier lives, earn more money, and generally become a much more valuable member of society. Things such as drug abuse, violence, criminal behaviors, and suicide all drastically decline when we see these behaviors become socially legitimized. Notice, of course, that I said behaviors that do not have a direct, measurable, negative impact on society. Theologists like this pastor tend to have extremely selective hearing when it comes to points like that, so I thought I'd like to underline it.
And if if somehow you're getting confused on identity issues, come and talk to us. We want to help you. We want to protect you. We want to open the Word of God and show you things that you need to consider as you contemplate these things.
You really should seek the advice of a mental health professional that specializes in LGBTQ+ issues, as they are specifically trained to deal with these issues, as opposed to a religious instructor who is essentially advocating for miraculous healing over scientific evidence.
The media, the medical world, and educational establishments are making it very difficult, in addition to employers in so many places, are making it difficult to voice any opposition to this agenda. I mean, they're making it difficult just to stay silent in response to this agenda.
First, I won't go too much into why saying LGBTQ+ people have an agenda is wrong, only to say that it is an unethical implication of nefarious intent. But more importantly, shouldn't what this pastor just said tell you something important? He said the media, the medical world, and educational establishments are making it very difficult to voice any opposition. Isn't it glaringly obvious that when the medical community, experts in the fields of biology, medicine, mental health, etc., are telling you that we should accept transgender people as just normal people, that we should perhaps be doing that? Perhaps the experts in the field of mental health who study these kinds of things for a living might have some better insight into the condition of gender dysphoria than some pastor to a small cult of so-called Christians?
Understand this, my beloved friends. This is not the first time that the people of God have been isolated in the world around them. This is not the first time, speaking analogically, by way of analogy, this is not the first time that the people of God have been told or tempted to offer just a pinch of incense to Caesar and acknowledge Caesar as Lord and then move on. We can't do that. We can't do that. And we can't allow a false reduction to say, it's just a difference between he and she. It's just a little acknowledgement of, going to a wedding or whatever it is. Those little acts are representative of entire worldviews, representative of and speak to an entire worldview, and we have to settle in our minds who is Lord over our conscience, who is Lord over our tongues, who is Lord over our thought.
While one could make a very good philosophical argument against this pastor's particular worldview, using someone's correct name and pronouns is not bending the knee to the Roman Kaiser or bending the knee to a particular worldview. It's just basic human decency. Literally nobody is asking you to give up your faith or change your perception of transgender people. What they are asking is that you correctly identify them in conversation. The reason we are asking for that isn't some LGBTQ+ ideology or agenda. It's because it helps us to live. 41% of transgender people report to having attempted suicide, compared to the 1.6% of the general population. That is a staggering number that you, by using a transgender person's chosen name and pronouns, can help reduce to a saner level. My question is, why wouldn't you extend the little bit of human decency that it takes to use different words to save another person's life? This isn't about changing a worldview or having your thoughts corrupted by the queer community. This is about your fellow humans' lives.
And so lead your family by being faithful to a local church. that in itself will establish an outer boundary of guardrails of protection as your children interact with older, mature Christians. This is going to be a vital aspect of it, because one of the primary means that teenagers are targeted is through their peers in online discussion groups that draw them away from their parents and into things that they never saw by flattering them and giving them false sympathy and false support, training their minds to question their parents and to move into a realm of evil that they don't even realize what's being done to them.
This is some first-hand knowledge and anecdotal evidence, but the teenagers that tend to fall into this category of falling into groups of alleged false sympathy and false support are people who are looking for answers to questions rooted deep in their minds. And the first thing that these people are generally told is that nothing is wrong with you. But why is that? Could it be that people who seek this kind of association online do so because they don't have the love and support they need as human beings in their good Christian homes? Could it be the reason they surround themselves with like-minded people who offer praise, give supposed love bombs, and generally support them in their gender identity journey is because they've been isolated, ostracized, and made to feel bad for being who they think they really are and really enjoy being? Maybe, just maybe, your hypothetical teenager here is intentionally seeking such a community of people out because it makes them feel good about who they are, gives them confidence, and makes them feel more normal than how they feel in their real life. Maybe these communities of your alleged false support exist because communities like yours exist, which harmfully ostracize these people and force them to seek out the social connections that they as humans so desperately desire.
I can't mandate what I'm about to say, but I would certainly delay as long as possible into college years, giving your child a smartphone and the things that happen through that exposure to media that you lose sight of, you lose control of.
You can't be serious, can you? Please, if you listen to one thing I say, it's don't cripple your child's development by limiting their exposure to technology. It's such a fundamentally important part of modern life that raising your kid in this almost Amish manner would be not only crippling for their potential career, but also it would utterly destroy any social life they could have.
Guaranteed to make some people angry, but you know what? I don't care. I don't care who gets mad at me over this. You need to beware of relatives that are in the homosexual, transgender lifestyle. You need to take seriously the fact that they are living in open rebellion against God. And, while they will vociferously contest what I'm about to say, the truth of the matter is that they will groom your children if you are not careful.
The reason people so vehemently contest what he said is because what he said is a proven lie that was once used against homosexual people and now being peddled against transgender people. For a direct modern example, WhoIsMakingNews.com reports that of 6,961 cases of crimes they've tracked so far against children, none of them have been reported to be committed by drag queens, 4 of them by transgender people, and 596 by people of religious employment. Importantly, and extremely alarmingly, the vast majority of people who perpetrate these crimes against children are from their own family or are otherwise known to be close to the child. If we break those statistics down even more, we now see that both transgender people and drag queens are at the bottom of the list, while Mormon leaders, doctors, politicians, babysitters, priests, church employees, and cops all perform way more crime against children. And oh, Pastor, your own profession is responsible for 5.14% of reported crimes against children, compared to transgender people's 0.000574%.
And so you need to defend your children from the violation of their minds just as much as you would protect them from the violation of their bodies at the hands of a predator.
Well, if the statistics are anything to go by, make sure you don't leave your child alone in a room with this guy.
You can do this. At the youngest of ages, You can teach your children that God made boys and girls. You can tell them that God made you just the way that you are.
Some more anecdotal evidence here, but as a Catholic child, I used to pray to God nightly to turn me into a girl. Yes, my transgender issues go back to when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and I'm not the only transgender person I've spoken to who has expressed similar behavior. Also, from a philosophical perspective, I find it weird that you're telling people that being transgender is wrong because it assumes that transgender people aren't part of God's plan. It's such a weird theological position to take that you somehow know your Almighty's plan and can dictate it to other people.
Focus on developing the principles in their minds and let the natural growth and development of childhood take place.
This isn't bad advice. It's the assumption that gender dysphoria is developed through social connections like a disease that's wrong. I was transgender when I was a child, and those feelings only grew, and my symptoms only got worse as I went through puberty and became an adult. So much so that after 41 years of essentially living a lie and trying to hide behind a macho masculine persona, I gave up and just decided to take estrogen. And I was suddenly happy, just genuinely happy and glad to be alive.
And I was just speaking within the past couple of weeks or so, a family dealing with a situation where their married son, probably with children, came to them and said, "Mom, Dad, I'm a girl now. I'm a woman now." And didn't see it coming. It's just shattering to everything that you've ever loved and worked for and assumed and presumed. They did not see it coming, and they're crushed in the midst of it. Well, what do you do? What do you do when that happens?
Well, instead of being crushed by this revelation that your son is now your daughter, perhaps you step back and ask questions. What are your name and pronouns, for starters, but also, how long have you known? If it's been a long time that they've known they were transgender, which it likely is, the next question should be, how have you managed to survive pretending to be something you weren't happy being? Instead of feeling sorry for yourself that your child is transgender, try to feel a little bit of empathy for the fact that they've spent their entire lives trying to live as something they didn't like so everyone else in their life could be happy. If, like in this pastor's story, you didn't see it coming, then imagine how much effort it must have taken for them to remain so closeted that you never even picked up on any hints that they might be transgender. Imagine how brutally painful and unforgiving that kind of life can be for a person, to pretend to be someone else, wearing clothes they don't feel comfortable in, speaking in a way that feels foreign to them, trying to force themselves to enjoy their gender-typical activities they're supposed to enjoy. All you have to do is have the empathy to imagine how mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausting it is to live day after day like a robot, unable to feel the joy of life everyone else around you tells you that you're supposed to be feeling. Anyone with any sort of moral compass should be able to feel at least a small amount of empathy for someone living like that. If you can't have the basic human decency to call someone that looks masculine to you a woman, then at least have the common courtesy to leave them alone and let them be happy.
They may ask you to affirm them and to use their new identity. And beloved, it's right here where you have to settle in your mind before that event comes into your family and into your life. You have to settle right now, meaning at this station in life, what you have to do in order to maintain loyalty to Christ. If this happens in a relationship, your beginning principle is that you have to hold to truth above the relationship. In love, you tell them, I do not accept the transgender worldview.
Transgender is not a worldview. LGBTQ+ is not a worldview. They are words used to describe aspects of human beings. It contextualizes certain properties of our social behaviors. It does not describe a singular way to view the world.
What happens so often is that they very well may tell you that you have to choose between your religion and your relationship with them. And you need to know that there's only one answer to that. You will not choose them over Christ. You refuse the manipulation, in other words.
If you refuse to help them in their journey, they have every right to cut you out of their lives. Transgender people spend their entire lives trying to be something they are not, and their one ask of you is that you help them on their journey. If you refuse to help them be happy, they have a responsibility to themselves, the betterment of their own lives, to cut you out of their life moving forward. It is not a matter of manipulation. For transgender people, it is a matter of survival.
But the approach that's used with young people, young girls, that they Google, am I transgender? And these videos pop up and these very winsome people will reach out to you. And one of the things that they will say, to just give you a sense of how demonic and depraved and perverted all of this is, one of the things that they will say to a person like that is if you're asking the question if you're transgender, you are transgender.
This is pretty much true. I've never met a cis person that has legitimately wondered if they were transgender. Sure, there may have been passing thoughts or even wondering what it would be like to live as a woman, but there's never been a cis person in my experience that had to go down the rabbit hole to discover their gender identity. So sure, someone may come across the phrase, if you have to ask, you are transgender, but that's clearly in relation to questioning your gender identity and not merely as a passing thought. You have to trust me on this. You go through a lot of internal struggle before coming to the conclusion that you're transgender, and even then you might spend 20 years of your life hiding it away. Just one phrase, if you ask, then you are, isn't going to magically cause anyone to seek measures to combat gender dysphoria that they don't have.
If you ask the question, you are transgender, and you see how wicked and how much it twists and perverts and is not designed to help anyone, but simply a target to bring them into the realm. This is like a black widow spider looking for someone to inject their poison into. Oh, I touched the web. Let me tell you. And in the guise of being a friend, they inject that poison and confuse a young mind in ways that are just utterly despicable.
The reason transgender people have such an overly supportive community is because the mentality of people like this pastor here pervades our society. Imagine discovering who you are only to be constantly put down by a hate-filled pastor like Pastor Don here. Imagine trying to live your life the way that makes you happy, only to have other people in your life and in society as a whole scoff at you and look down at you because you don't look like a typical man or a woman. Now imagine that you're part of a group of people where 41% of that group has attempted suicide. The reason the transgender community is so openly supportive of each other and encouraging of others is because we are literally dying. In many cases, the transgender community is the last bastion of goodwill and positivity that we have in our lives. Being encouraging is not a poison. It is the lifeblood that keeps human beings alive.
It is often the nature of the LGBTQ community. Don't like the term, but it communicates, I guess. It's often the nature of that realm to act like a cult and to isolate people away from those who have always loved them.
This coming from the pastor that literally tells his congregation to shun transgender people because they are transgender and to dedicate their lives to the bad renegotiation of some ancient manuscripts over the well-being of his fellow humans.
But tell them they're not crazy not to go along with it. God made everyone man or woman, male or female.
So, just as an aside, intersex people aren't welcome in your congregation, Pastor?
What do we do when people tell us to change the name and pronouns by which we call them? Look, this is a difficult question.
No, it's not. You call them by their names and pronouns. It's super simple, actually. Even bigots like you can do it.
And I know that there are people who think you should play along and honor their wishes. After all, it's just a pronoun. But beloved, that pronoun isn't in isolation. That pronoun is in the context of coercion and threats.
The problem here is the pastor is coming at this from the point of view of having his worldview attacked. this is incorrect. What is happening in these situations is that the transgender person is saying, this is how I feel I need to live, and I want you to be part of my new life, but I need your cooperation for that to be a reality. It's not coercive or threatening to make a choice between living and keeping someone hurtful to you actively in your life.
Within the walls of Truth Community Church, beloved, you need to understand that our position is clear. We have not hidden this from anyone. We've been outspoken on this. We've been clear and definitive about it. We believe that transgender ideology is opposed to the truth. It's opposed to the principle of absolute truth. For one thing, that it will undermine the gospel in time because of the way that it perceives reality.
Transgender people do not represent an ideology. Their opinions and ideas occupy a large swath of the socio-political spectrum, ranging from militant left to militant right. There's no single characteristic of thinking attributed to transgender people. The one thread we have in common is that we are transgender and we are trying to live our best possible lives. Also, how in the world can one come to the conclusion that using a transgender person's name and pronouns is going to lead to undermining the gospel? I'm just utterly baffled by the concept that my mere existence is somehow an existential threat to Christianity.
We would say in advance to our members that our members, the members of Truth Community Church, are not at liberty to defend transgender identity in others, particularly in their family members. Let me say that again. A member of Truth Community Church is not at liberty to defend transgender identity in others.
I'm sorry for letting that play out so long, but this pastor has the audacity to call LGBTQ+ a cult in the same sermon where he literally dictates what members of his church are allowed to do outside the confines of his church.
The soldier proves his faithfulness not when he's on leave. He doesn't prove his faithfulness in times of peace. He doesn't prove his courage when the enemy has left. A soldier proves his faithfulness when the battle is engaged, when the shots are coming in, when the rockets are coming in, and there's an effort to kill that which he's sworn to protect. Well, beloved, this whole LGBTQ thing is an incoming rocket on the Church of Jesus Christ.
No, it's not. There are plenty of LGBTQ+ people that are practicing Christians. One's sexuality, gender identity, or anything else is not a statement for or against some form of faith. So that was a lot longer than I thought it would be, but this pastor brought up some horribly transphobic statements, and unfortunately, it's the kind of mentality that permeates the right wing in my country. Hopefully these responses were helpful. As always, if you have anything you'd like to say, suggestions, or you just want to vent, please feel free to drop a comment, like, and subscribe.